Hi everyone, and welcome to the Government Affairs Update as part of the 2020 Sport Fishing Summit. I'm stating the obvious here, but 2020 has been a pretty wild year for all of us in so many ways. Working in Washington, D.C., we always have to deal with some level of disruption and chaos, but add a global pandemic into the mix and it's been taken to a whole new level. During this presentation, I'm going to go over some of the challenges we've faced and successes we've achieved over the past year. Each of your regional ASA Government Affairs staff will give you a quick overview of what they've been working on. You'll see an interview I did with Frank Paul King, president of Temple Fork Outfitters, about his involvement in ASA's government affairs work. And finally, we'll look ahead to our priorities in the year to come. So jumping back to early March, which seems like several years ago, things were humming along. The week after the Bassmaster Classic, I remember being in DC and attending a few fundraisers for members of Congress where, other than some casual jokes about this virus that seemed so abstract and far off, everything was pretty normal. One of our top priority bills, the Descend Act, passed out of the House Natural Resources Committee, and I was sitting there in the committee room watching the vote live. That Thursday, March 12th, I remember having breakfast in the Dirksen Senate Office building before a meeting with an Appropriations Committee staffer when someone forwarded me an article predicting how in the very near future, this novel coronavirus would affect nearly every aspect of our daily lives. The headline of that article was that in 2 to 4 weeks, the world would be in lockdown. I began to think that what previously seemed abstract and far off might actually be immediate and real. Then during that appropriations meeting, the staffer I was meeting with got an alert saying that visitors would no longer be allowed in the Senate office buildings. As I left, it started to dawn on me that I wouldn't be having any meetings on the Hill anytime soon. Just as that article predicted, things began unraveling pretty quickly after that, and life hasn't been the same since. There have been a few upsides for me personally during this pandemic. I live about 50 miles south of Washington, D.C., so I either drive or take a commuter train into work. Working mostly from home, I haven't missed the hour-plus train rides each way, which sometimes turn to 3 or 4 hours if something really goes wrong with the train. And I really haven't missed driving what's been rated as one of the worst commutes in the country. Without that commuter travel or late-night receptions, I've been able to spend a lot more time with my wife and kids, which has been especially nice since we welcomed our third child, Blake, into the world back in January. Of course, there is such thing as too much of a good thing. So we've all been excited about the kids going back to school and daycare over the last month. From a work standpoint, I and the rest of the government affairs team have remained busy and productive. In-person meetings with congressional staff, federal agency officials, and partner organizations have turned into more and more emails, phone calls, and Zoom meetings. Way too many Zoom meetings. But despite the challenges we've been facing, particularly from that lack of face-to-face interaction, we've seen a remarkable number of accomplishments lately, more than any I can remember at any time since I've been with ASA. Starting with the COVID-19 pandemic, by mid-March, we had to essentially table all of our normal work and instead focus on the impacts of the pandemic. A lot of our time was spent trying to keep states from closing down fishing access and businesses. We were in frequent communications with governors, state fish and wildlife agencies to discuss what we were facing and reinforce the importance of keeping fishing businesses and access open as safely as possible. And other than a few outliers, most states recognized the importance of maintaining access to the outdoors and over time began easing restrictions on business operations. We were also actively involved in tracking federal COVID relief legislation and keeping the industry up to date on relief opportunities like the Paycheck Protection Program. I know many of you participate in this program, and we at ASA are hopeful that trade associations will be able to participate at some point too. We also worked hard working with Congress, NOAA Fisheries, and the coastal states to ensure that $300 million in fishery relief funds provided by Congress doesn't go solely to commercial fishing. And while $300 million gets spread pretty quickly when divided up amongst the coastal states and territories, this has been an important source of relief for many businesses. Another priority was ensuring the delay in the payment due date of the federal excise tax on sport fishing equipment. Allowing companies to hold on to these funds has helped them weather the early hardships created by the pandemic while making sure that the states will ultimately still receive the excise tax dollars that they so vitally need. By May, state restrictions were being lifted and more people were starting to leave their houses. Along with that, Congress began transitioning back to non-COVID work, and the fisheries management agencies we work closely with were starting to meet again, albeit virtually. Fortunately for us, Congress quickly turned its attention back to the Great American Outdoors Act, which had gained a lot of momentum earlier in the year. By now, I hope you've heard about this bill being signed into law. It's truly one of the biggest legislative achievements for conservation in decades. But what does it actually do? There are two main parts of the Great American Outdoors Act. One has to do with the Land and Water Conservation Fund, or LWCF, which funds federal, state, and local efforts to safeguard natural areas and create outdoor recreation opportunities throughout the country. This program has been around since 1964 and is funded by royalty payments from offshore oil and gas drilling in federal waters. However, in most years, Congress has taken over half of that amount and put it towards other purposes. So the Great American Outdoors Act guarantees $900 million per year in perpetuity for LWCF. This means hundreds of millions of dollars a year more for creating and enhancing recreational areas, trails, and waterways all across the country. The other main part of the Great American Outdoors Act is the establishment of the National Park and Public Lands Legacy Restoration Fund, which will provide up to $9 billion over the next 5 years to fix deferred maintenance at national parks, wildlife refuges, forests, and other federal lands. This funding is needed badly. The number of visitors to our federal public lands has increased by 50% since 1980, but these budgets have remained effectively flat. This imbalance has led to a $12 billion backlog of maintenance on national parks alone, which is needed to repair roads, trails, campgrounds, and other visitor infrastructure. But thanks to the Great American Outdoors Act, this will finally be addressed. Ultimately, this means improved access and visitor experiences at our nation's public lands that provide critical opportunities for recreational fishing for our industry. Taking a step back, so on average, only about 3% of bills introduced in Congress ultimately get enacted, and that includes a lot of bills that have to get done, like authorizing funding for the Defense Department. So getting one major piece of legislation like the Great American Outdoors Act enacted in a year is a pretty big deal for us. That's what made the recent passage of another major bill, America's Conservation Enhancement Act, or the ACE Act, all the more remarkable. The ACE Act is a package of about a dozen provisions related to fish and wildlife conservation and management that we and many other hunting and fishing groups work to package together and pass as a bundle. Most notably for ASA, the ACE Act includes authorizing the National Fish Habitat Partnership, which is a highly successful program that brings together local, state, and federal partners to carry out on-the-ground aquatic habitat restoration projects, all for the benefit of recreational fishing. There are currently 20 of these partnerships operating throughout the country, but without congressional approval and direction, it's possible this program could be reduced or eliminated based on the whims of bureaucrats. But thanks to the ACE Act, this program is secured, and more funding will go to projects all across the country that will benefit fish habitat and fishing opportunities. I should note that past ASA Vice President Gordon Robertson helped draft the original version of this legislation all the way back in 2008. So it's been a long time coming. The ACE Act also secures a 5-year protection for lead fishing tackle against unwarranted regulation by the EPA. As many of you will recall, it's happened several times over the years where the EPA has been petitioned by certain groups to ban all lead fishing tackle nationwide despite lacking any legitimate evidence to support it. While science and common sense have prevailed each time, there's no telling what a future administration might do with such a petition. So thankfully, the ACE Act provides us with an assurance that we won't have to deal or worry about this kind of unwarranted regulation for the near future. Finally, the ACE Act contains several provisions essential to restoring the Chesapeake Bay, the nation's largest estuary and a critical nursery to sport fish along the Atlantic coast like striped bass. Most importantly, it reauthorizes the Chesapeake Bay program to incrementally increase funding to $92 million annually by 2025. This decades-old program coordinates scientific research and distributes grants for local restoration projects, and the steady improvements we've seen in the bay's health over time are a direct result of this program. Thanks to the ACE Act, we'll see it continue and grow into the future. The success of the Great American Outdoors Act and the ACE Act shows the value of persistence and partnerships. Remarkably, the lead fishing tackle provision almost tanked the ACE Act due to opposition from some in the House. But our coalition stayed united, kept pushing, and thankfully we were still able to get it done. This wouldn't be possible without the strong partnerships we built with groups like the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, and many others. So I want to thank them for their partnership and for sticking with us. As a couple folks on the ASA staff like to say, teamwork makes the dream work. We're optimistic that there's still more to come from Congress too. Several other bills we're working on have gotten pretty far down the tracks this session, like the Descend Act, which would help conserve Gulf of Mexico reef fish, and the Drift Net Modernization and Bycatch Reduction Act, which would ban highly destructive commercial fishing gear currently used in the California swordfish fishery. Beyond these federal bills, our government affairs team has accomplished a lot on a bunch of regional issues that are really important to the industry. We have an incredibly talented group of policy professionals here at ASA who over the last few years have really helped us up our involvement on policy issues affecting the sport fishing industry throughout the country. I'll now turn to each one of them to give a quick summary of what they've been working on and what's coming up.
Hi, I'm Kelly Ralston, your Southeast Fisheries Policy Director. I cover the Gulf and South Atlantic regions for ASA, focusing on clean water, abundant fisheries, and access to both. This year has been a challenge for everyone. However, despite the difficulties, your government affairs team has continued to work hard for you. In the Southeast, we completed a multi-year effort to put the Gulf states in charge of red snapper management for anglers, and supported regulations that will increase the survival of released snapper grouper fish, potentially leading to improved fishing opportunities in the South Atlantic. We also spearheaded introduction of the Descend Act in Congress that would enact similar requirements in the Gulf. That, I'm pleased to report, has passed the House of Representatives and is now awaiting Senate action. It was also a busy year in Florida, where we supported extraordinary state funding for Everglades restoration, coral reefs, and water quality, and funding to implement Florida's State Reef Fish Survey, which will significantly improve recreational data collection. ASA also supported passage of the Clean Waterways Act, the most significant overhaul of Florida water regulations in more than a decade. Looking to the coming year, we will continue to address ongoing challenges to angler access to Gulf and South Atlantic red snapper, and promote increased funding for Everglades restoration and the expediting, planning, and construction of related projects. Some of our other priority issues are improving regional and national recreational data collection, promoting the need for coral disease response and restoration, and guiding the development of a new management plan for the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. Thank you for your support, and please feel free to contact me on these or any other issues you may have. Have a great day.
Hi, I'm Mike Wayne, your Atlantic Fisheries Policy Director, covering the Mid-Atlantic and New England regions. Over the past year, we have worked on several important policy topics, and I wanted to highlight a few of those for you and talk about where we're headed in 2021. We'll start with striped bass, where we supported a conservation-based decision to reduce harvests in this fishery and ensured the burden was shared equally between the recreational and commercial sectors. Because catch and release mortality is an issue for the striped bass fishery, we worked with On the Water to develop education and outreach materials to guide anglers in using circle hooks and handling striped bass properly. We then made those materials available to all the state agencies for their education campaigns. We were also busy on Atlantic Menhaden. In late 2019, we supported a decision by the Secretary of Commerce to force Virginia to come into compliance with Menhaden conservation regulations that were violated in the Chesapeake Bay. We also successfully advocated for a new and improved management approach for Atlantic Menhaden that will account for its role as forage to support striped bass and other predators throughout the entire Atlantic ecosystem. Our work plan in 2021 includes several high priority topics. We'll continue to support the evolution of Menhaden management to account for its role as critical forage through the implementation of conservation-based catch quotas. At the same time, we want to see thoughtful management options for rebuilding striped bass to its population target and working with managers in our community to address catch and release mortality will be important. In the Mid-Atlantic, we will be supporting favorable quota allocation changes in several coastal fisheries currently under allocation review. We'll also continue to work on the development of management reform for the region's recreational fisheries to provide more regulatory stability, flexibility, and accessibility in those fisheries. We'll also be working directly with offshore wind energy developers to ensure wind energy projects throughout the Atlantic are developed responsibly. This will include prioritizing research needs and developing an industry input group to minimize impacts to recreational fishing access. Thank you for all your support over the last year, and we look forward to a productive year ahead.
Hi, my name is Danielle Cloutier, and I'm the Pacific Fisheries Policy Director here at ASA. Despite these challenging times and despite being forced to work inside for a lot of it, we've had some very big victories in the West Coast portfolio. We recently, with our partners on the ground in California, successfully defeated a California bill called AB 3030, which likely would have resulted in a lot of increased no-take areas and issues related to recreational fishing access in the state, which of course the association was going to fight tooth and nail. And like I said, we successfully defeated that bill, but unfortunately we do expect this issue to come up in the future. So every member of your government affairs team is going to be tracking it diligently going forward. So in the next couple months and looking to the next Congress, there's a lot of exciting projects I'll be working on, and I'll highlight one for you now. I'm going to be focusing heavily on the drift gill net Bycatch Reduction Act, which recently passed the Senate unanimously. It's a bill that would phase out very archaic and destructive fishing gear in the state of California. So over the next couple of months, I'm going to be focusing heavily on increasing support in the House of Representatives in the hopes that we can get President Trump to sign it into law by the end of the year. So thanks all for your support, and I look forward to seeing you together in the future.
Greetings all, and thank you for tuning into the 2020 Sport Fishing Summit. My name is Chad Tokowitz and I'm ASA's Inland Fisheries Policy Manager, responsible for covering freshwater fisheries policy and conservation issues at both federal and state levels. As you might imagine, this includes a wide range of topics from securing federal funding for important agencies and regional programs to engaging in state bills that attempt to regulate fishing equipment to opposing irresponsible mining operations that threaten fisheries. Currently, stopping the proposed Pebble Mine in Alaska is one of the top issues I'm working on. With federal permitting pushing ahead for this massive and threatening mine, it is imperative that ASA and our coalition partners make our voices heard. A major victory came on August 20th when the Army Corps of Engineers delayed the permit decision by 90 days with the requirement that Pebble Limited develop an adequate compensatory mitigation plan. While this is a positive development, ultimately we need the mine rejected outright, which is why we encourage the EPA to veto the mine. Recent successes in my portfolio include defeating a Minnesota bill that would have prohibited the use, manufacture, and sale of all lead sinkers and jigs smaller than 1 ounce, defeating a Maine bill that would have prohibited fishing in inland waters using non-biodegradable hooks or certain non-biodegradable artificial lures, and the passage of the Boundary Waters Wilderness Protection and Pollution Prevention Act out of the House Committee on Natural Resources. Looking ahead to the coming year, I am working on the revamped Pitch It 2.0 campaign that encourages anglers to properly dispose of worn-out soft plastic baits, which in addition to being the right thing to do, will help us ward off possible legislation to overregulate and ban artificial lures. I will also ensure unwarranted state-level bans on lead tackle are not enacted, and assure that programs to manage, eradicate, and control aquatic invasive species like Asian carp receive proper funding and advocacy. The Brandon Road Lock and Dam is another major priority, as this project will be crucial in stopping the movement of Asian carp from the Mississippi River to the Great Lakes. In all, despite the lack of normalcy, this year has been filled with many successes and positive outcomes on the freshwater fisheries policy front. I look forward to the rest of 2020 and what 2021 has in store. Thank you.
So as you can see, we've got a great group of government affairs staff at ASA who really know their stuff. If you ever hear about an issue going on in your region and have questions or need help, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. So let's next turn to a member spotlight. We can't be effective as an association without informed and involved members. Both in helping us develop our policy positions and in engaging in the legislative process, ASA member involvement is critical to what we do. And it's really not that hard. As a great case study in the benefits of getting involved with ASA's government affairs program, both for your business and for the association, I talked to Frank Paul King, president of Temple Fork Outfitters, to go over how and why he's become so active with us.
All right. Well, hi, everyone, and welcome. Pleased to have joining with us Frank Paul King, president of Temple Fork Outfitters, and a valued ASA member here to talk for a few minutes with us about his and his company's growing role with ASA, the work that they've been doing to help support the association and help us, build relationships with some key members of Congress, and the benefits that that's paid off for us, for the industry. So first, Frank Paul, thanks for taking the time. Really appreciate it. I know you guys got a lot going on, so I appreciate you taking a little time to work this in.
You bet, Mike. Happy to do it.
So we first met back in 2017, I guess, at least as far back as I can remember. I was certainly familiar with the brand Temple Fork, but at that time, it's sort of been a long-standing thing we've been working on is matching up ASA members with key members of Congress that we work on and trying to help cultivate those relationships. So rather than it just being ASA talking to these folks, for these members of Congress to understand that there's folks back in their district that we represent who are employing folks and supporting the recreational fishing industry and help build that message that they understand the importance of this industry. And your member of Congress is certainly a valuable one for us. It's Congressman Mark Veazey, who represents you all there in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and is really involved in the Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus, the chair of that, and has been really active with hunting and fishing issues in his time in Congress. So certainly a relationship we've wanted to keep building. So Yeah, back in 2017, we started with him coming and doing a site visit, which I remember going well, and then you followed that up with at least one other visit. So can you talk a little bit about those experiences of hosting your congressman there at your facility?
Sure. So, when you first called us, TFO had never had any experience at all in the government affairs space. And it was just fortuitous that Mark was our representative here in Dallas. And he came out, and it was absolutely my first exposure to him or any legislator. And so he came out, we had a great time. And what was so special was that immediately we connected with him because Mark is a fisherman, he's a hunter. And so it was super easy to talk to him about the business and really begin to share with him the role of companies like TFO in the fishing space. And ultimately what that turned into was Mark has a program where once a month or once a quarter, he goes out and he works on site at his constituents' businesses. And so last year, Mark came out and spent a day with us, worked in several parts of our business, including customer service and out in the warehouse and warranty repair, and ultimately had lunch with all of our employees, which was super special because virtually all of our employees are also his constituents. And so it was a great opportunity to cement the relationship, not just in an industry way, but in a very personal way. And so as a result, we've maintained a great relationship with him and value him as both a friend and a supporter of the fishing industry.
Yeah, and it's certainly demonstrated itself that he is a big supporter of the industry. He was active and involved before, but the relationship that you all have been able to build there, where his office is constantly reaching out to us, asking for input, wanting to know what you all think about things. He's been a champion of several bills we've worked on, most notably this National Fish Habitat Partnership bill that actually just passed the House yesterday. And I think him championing that effort and understanding the connection it has back to folks like you all in the district, that always helps us in getting these things across the finish line. And that relationship that started back in 2017, those couple other site visits, you all haven't just interacted there at your facility. You had the privilege of coming up to DC back in the winter, and Congressman Veazey also serves on the Small Business Committee, and they held a hearing to understand some of the challenges, opportunities facing small businesses in the outdoor recreation sector. And you were invited to testify before Congress. So talk a little bit about what that experience was like. Probably your first time getting that type of invitation.
Sure. So one, regardless of how you feel about Washington, regardless of how your political persuasions lead you, the opportunity to go up and testify was a huge honor and really great fun. And it was great fun because it was a platform to share with a group of lawmakers the role that the outdoor rec industry plays in the broader economy. And as you spend a little bit of time talking to lawmakers and you visit the Hill, what you learn is that they're very interested in votes and they're very interested in economic realities of their constituents. And so the opportunity to come and really explain just how powerful and large and how many people are involved in outdoor recreation was super, super positive because they're just now beginning to appreciate that. And if you think about it, one of the things that we talked about a lot was that because the majority of the employees in our industry are actually also participants in the industry, that makes them a super loud voice, both in social media and in various political aspects. And so Washington takes note of that, right? Because it's economically large and it's got a lot of voters. So I think it was great fun to go up and talk. And I came away feeling like myself and the other folks that had testified did a really good job of saying this is an industry that you need to pay attention to. And I think the lawmakers, will pay attention as a result, which is positive.
Yeah, and I think that hearing was, further building this case that we've been making over the last few years, and is starting to actually get folks' attention that this outdoor recreation sector isn't just about fun, it's about jobs and economic impact. 2.2% of GDP in this sector. That's starting to raise some eyebrows, and you get taken a little bit more seriously when people get past the fun side of it and understand the economics. And it's a case we're going to continue making. But Frank, Paul, since we first met, in addition to the stuff we've done with Congressman Veazey, you've gotten really active and really dove in, getting involved with ASA. You serve on our Government Affairs Committee. You're involved with our sport fishing pack. You've, as we've talked about, visited Washington, D.C. a few times. What value are you seeing? I mean, you've got a lot of other stuff going on there. You've got a company to run. To devote that level of time and energy to working with this association, what drives you to do that? What benefits do you see in getting active and engaged in that way?
I think it's really important to say up front that I had absolutely no experience in government affairs when you first came to visit in 2017. And that when we first met Representative Veazey, what became very apparent is that if you're not sharing your voice, if you're not talking to the folks that actually make laws, then they're making laws without your input. And so you were kind enough to say, hey, gosh, you know at least one congressman now, why don't you come on the Government Affairs Committee? And I remember distinctly that at some point before our first summit meeting, you sent to me, or you sent to all the Government Affairs Committee members a package of those things that we were going to focus on. And I got this package and it had 67 items that Government Affairs was working on, and those were just affairs at a national level. And beyond that, we had all of the things that were going on with states. And so what amazed me was just how impactful legislation and all the things related to legislation and all the federal agencies, how much impact all of those have on our anglers and our habitat and our industry. And so it has been incredibly fun for me to be on the committee and be involved because, number one, I have a basic understanding of the importance of getting out and sharing with people who affect our industry, how it affects us and how they can help us. And then the outcome of that has been, as you mentioned a minute ago, Mike, is that just in the short time that I've been involved, I've seen legislation go from, hey, maybe this will come about, it's something that would be good for us, to legislation being passed. And I think, the other big takeaway I'd share is that regardless of how intractable or dysfunctional we can be led to believe Washington is, the truth is legislation is getting passed and laws are getting made and decisions are happening that do affect us as anglers, do affect our customers, do affect our businesses. And so, one area that ASA is absolutely, I think, having a positive impact is in its ability to say, hey, here's how you, Congressman, you, Senator, you, committee member, you, agency, can help us. And I know from personal experience that that gets the job done and it moves the ball in our direction. So, I'm happy to just play a super small role, but I know it's one that's helping out, and it's been positive for me.
Yeah, well, I appreciate all those insights. You're exactly right that things are trending in a good direction. We still got a lot of challenges, opportunities ahead of us, but the work we do as staff wouldn't be possible without support, guidance, and folks like you. The more of that participation we get from the industry, the more it helps us, guide us in the right direction and get us more of those credible voices out there who understand the issues and understand the value of engaging. You all are infinitely better lobbyists than we are because you are real life constituents and voters and employ folks that are voters as well. And those are the voices we need, and the credibility, and not only in that sort of outward engagement with the policymakers, but also in making sure we're heading in the right direction. So it's been great cultivating this relationship, and I appreciate that you see that value too, and look forward to keeping it going for the years to come. And hopefully get more of this stuff across the finish line that we keep working on. So Frank Paul, appreciate your time, appreciate those thoughts, and let's hope more folks in the industry follow your lead and step up in the same way that you have.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks.
So as you just heard from Frank Paul, there are lots of ways ASA members can get involved with the issues that affect your business. To make it even easier for you to learn how, we have an advocacy toolbox on our website, which you can find at this URL. This toolbox lists ways you can help. This includes signing up for Keep America Fishing, where you'll receive news and alerts on all the policy issues and how you can help. Be sure to take action on our alerts and share them with your employees, customers, friends, and family. We're also on social media, so connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. We're constantly sharing information there so you can help get informed and help us spread the word. As all you know in business, relationships are critical. And as you just heard from Frank Paul, one of the best ways to build relationships with your political representatives is to host them at your facility and show them firsthand the economic importance of recreational fishing. We're happy to help set these up for you, so feel free to reach out to me to get things started, or just be ready to say yes when I reach out to you. If you'd rather go to them than have them come to you, another extremely valuable way to get involved is to come visit Washington, D.C. and see your congressional delegation. We'll periodically organize fly-ins on certain issues, or you can come whenever you'd like and we'll take you around. There's always value in seeing how the legislative process works and for getting involved firsthand. Trust me, they want to hear what you have to say. Last but certainly not least, I want to touch on Sportfishing PAC. Sportfishing PAC is our industry's bipartisan political action committee that supports congressional candidates based on their record of support for the sport fishing industry. Thank you to all of our current supporters, and if you're not a current supporter, I'd love to talk to you more about the PAC. But first, you have to sign the prior approval form, which you can access at this URL. There are plenty of challenges ahead of us, but with your help, we can accomplish even more in the coming year. So I've talked a lot about what we've done, but what's ahead of us? First, one of our top emerging issues that requires our attention is a new global initiative that aims to protect 30% of all lands and waters by the year 2030, known as 30 by 30. Now, we in the sport fishing industry are all about conservation, so we're hopeful that this is something we can get behind. But as the policy idea is starting to emerge in the U.S., things are kind of getting off on the wrong foot. So as you heard earlier from Danielle, a vaguely written but ominous bill in California called AB 3030 tried to achieve this 30 by 30 goal, but the bill supporters refused to clarify that recreational fishing would not be unnecessarily banned as part of the bill's implementation. So that meant that large areas of the state's lands and waters could be closed to recreational fishing under the premise of protecting 30% of it. This policy will surely reemerge in California and will start coming to light in other states and at the federal level. So working with several of our close partners, we will be fully engaged to ensure that this policy proceeds in a way that doesn't result in unwarranted closures to recreational fishing. It'll surely be a hot topic during this week's Government Affairs Committee meeting if you want to tune in for more information. Some of our other priorities we'll be focusing on includes ensuring the Sportfish Restoration and Boating Trust Fund is reauthorized during the next round of the federal highway bill, which has to occur in order to continue collecting the gas tax attributable to small engines and motorboats. Congress recently approved a one-year extension of the current highway bill, but we will remain vigilant to ensure our program remains a part of the picture as this continues to play out over the coming year. We'll also be fully engaged in the Magnuson-Stevens Act reauthorization discussion. Through the Modern Fish Act, we got a lot of improvements made to the primary law governing federal marine fisheries, but there's still much more work to be done. Congressman Jared Huffman, the chairman of the Water, Oceans, and Wildlife Subcommittee in the House, has spent a lot of time in the last year gathering information to inform his reauthorization efforts. And ASA thankfully was invited to testify at several of his regional listening sessions. We're looking forward to participating in the long-awaited MSA reauthorization that continues to evolve federal fisheries management to better account for the importance of recreational fishing. Of course, trade will continue to be a big priority of ours. China tariffs certainly threw much of the industry for a loop over the last couple years, and it's impossible to predict how this plays out no matter how the election in November goes. But we'll continue to stay on top of it and assist ASA members in navigating the tariff process, as well as other tax and trade issues, particularly surrounding the federal excise tax. The last thing I'll mention is federal appropriations. I mentioned earlier how few bills in Congress ultimately get enacted, but Congress does have to fund the federal government each year. And while it's always messy and sometimes they let the government shut down for a little while, eventually it gets done, and this is an area where we've had a lot of success lately in advocating for funding and policy direction on a wide range of ASA priorities. This includes aquatic invasive species control like Asian carp, restoring the Everglades, and improving fisheries data. So as we look ahead, let's hope these COVID vaccines come sooner than later, the economy gets back on its feet, supply chain issues get resolved, and we continue to see this incredible surge in fishing participation. We're hopeful that the work ASA's government affairs team has done and will continue to do will provide long-term benefits for the industry by creating more fishing access and improving the health and abundance of our fisheries. I can't emphasize enough how much we need you to be involved, so please reach out to me or any of our other staff to discuss ways we can work together to support the future of our industry. Thanks for watching, and tight lines.